My name is Liora Hamilton, 35 years old. The crystal ballroom looked like someone had poured warm honey over a small city. Light pooled in every chandelier and ran in ribbons across ivory linens, silver flatware, and white orchids that smelled faintly like winter rain. My husband, Marcus, and I slipped in a few minutes late, our reflections rippling in the glass doors as a string quartet tested a final arpeggio. I tugged at the hem of my navy dress, the one I'd bought 3 years ago for a district award ceremony, and tried to ignore how the carpet softened and swallowed our steps, like the room didn't mind if I vanished without a sound. Dad stood near the entrance, a charcoal suit sculpting him into the idea of a leader he'd always been, Principal Robert Hamilton, 30 years of polished authority. Beside him, Patricia glittered in gold sequins, a diamond at her throat catching the light with theatrical precision. When they saw us, Patricia's smile reached me first. Dad's arrived late and stopped short of his eyes. "Liora," he boomed, a little too loudly for a hallway greeting. "You made it." "We wouldn't miss it," I said. "Congratulations, Dad." Patricia's gaze skimmed my dress, like a grater scanning for errors. "How lovely! Jessica's been working the room for almost an hour, networking with the board. You know how dedicated she is." Jessica, her daughter, the one who always seemed to be standing exactly where the light was brightest, was at the VIP table, the red of her dress so exacting it felt like a deliberate warning. She laughed with David Chen, the chairman of the Education Fund Board, fingers resting on the back of a chair that should have had my name on it. We followed an usher through the hum of conversation and the clink of glasses. A massive banner hovered over the stage, celebrating Principal Robert Hamilton, 30 years of educational excellence. A camera crew adjusted angles near the podium. Whatever was planned tonight was meant to be witnessed, replayed, and remembered. Marcus checked his phone again, the screen lighting his face for the briefest instant. Usually that annoyed me at events. Tonight it felt like a secret heartbeat I couldn't quite hear. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Last-minute work thing," he said, squeezing my fingers. "Promise it won't interfere." The VIP table was a small constellation of power. My father, Patricia, major donors, board members, a press liaison, and the perfectly upright chair right beside Jessica. 8 chairs, 7 name cards. I scanned twice, then a third time, as if a magician's reveal might flick my name into existence. It didn't. "There must be a mistake," I said, keeping my voice respectfully soft. Teacher voice, calming, measured. "My card's missing." Patricia arrived like a stage cue, her perfume arriving before her words. "Oh, sweetheart, we did a little last-minute reshuffling. Space is tight." "At my father's table?" I asked. "You're at table 12, she said brightly, pointing past a mirrored column to the back of the room where the spotlight dissolved into polite shadows. "With the district educators. You'll have so much to talk about." "My daughter belongs with her family," Marcus said, calm enough that it was almost a kindness. Patricia's smile sharpened, but didn't move. "Family is flexible," she murmured, already turning back toward the donors. "Jessica, tell Mr. Chen about that case you closed." Dad approached, adjusting his tie the way he used to before assemblies. "It's just logistics, Liora," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Jessica has connections that will benefit the fund. You understand?" "Connections," I repeated, like a foreign word I was trying to memorize. "I understand." Marcus's phone buzzed in his palm. He glanced at it, and something in his expression flickered, there and gone, like a shadow crossing water. I couldn't name it, but it wasn't worry. Table 12 was a polite exile, polyester cloth instead of silk, chairs that creaked, teachers doing their best imitation of comfort in their best clothes. "You're third grade at PS 48, right?" asked Mrs. Chen from Riverside Middle, her smile sympathetic. "I heard you won Teacher of the Year." "I did," I said, tucking hair behind my ear. "Thank you." "That's wonderful," she said, and we both heard the subtext. Wonderful, but not VIP. Across the room, Patricia's voice rose just enough to carry. "This is Jessica, Senior Associate, Harvard Law. She's identified several corporate partnerships for the fund." Laughter. Glass against glass. My father's hand on David Chen's shoulder, a practiced lean-in. He passed our table without stopping. Twice. Marcus's phone lit up again. In the glow, I caught a half-phrase on his screen. "Confirmation received. Ready when you are." I looked at him. "What's going on?" "Work," he said gently. "And something else." Trust me? I nodded, because if I didn't, the shake would travel from my jaw to my hands. The lights softened, the quartet hushed. Dad stepped to the microphone, every inch the man who'd given 30 years to a system that raised and sometimes saved children. The room leaned forward without being asked. "Thank you for joining me tonight," he began, and I felt 13 again, puffed with pride at a father who stood taller than the rest. He moved through acknowledgments: board, principals, donors. When he turned toward the VIP table, my heart climbed like a child onto a countertop, straining to see. "My beautiful wife, Patricia," he said, "and I'm especially proud to have Jessica here, someone who embodies excellence." Applause. Jessica stood, red dress reflecting gold light, smile calibrated for cameras. Then he moved on. It took a second to understand what hadn't happened, another to feel it, another to agree with it out loud in my head. He wasn't going to say my name. Mrs. Chen's hand found my forearm. It's fine," I said, and my voice sounded like a hallway after school, clean and echoing and empty. Dad cleared his throat, gathering the room again. "Now, the big announcement," he said, the phrase he used when something consequential would be embroidered into a school year. "As you know, the Hamilton Education Fund has received a generous $5 million commitment from Tech Edu Corporation." Murmurs, bright and appreciative. "Tonight, I'm thrilled to announce the person who will take my seat on the board when I retire." I sat up straight without meaning to. 3 years ago, on the night the fund was created, Dad had said it over the phone. "When I step down, you'll carry the torch, Liora. Your classroom experience is exactly what we need." "After careful consideration," he said, voice warm with pride, "Jessica Morrison will be joining the board." Applause detonated across the room. On the live stream screen by the bar, I saw myself not clapping, a still figure in a sea of moving hands. Someone's phone camera turned toward table 12. A teacher whispered, "That seat was hers." My breath came in bright, hard pieces. I thought of the proposals I'd drafted: unit grants, mentorship pipelines, retention stipends, pages slept on, carried, revised, until the coffee stains looked like maps. I thought of Tommy with dyslexia, Sarah with the whispered voice that wouldn't cross a threshold until it did. I thought of the seat with no card. "Excuse me," I said to no one and to everyone. I stood. By the time I reached the VIP table, my legs had found a rhythm that wasn't grace exactly, but couldn't be pushed aside. Conversations dimmed around my approach, like someone turning down the volume on a radio to catch bad news. "Dad," I said, "we need to talk." "Not now," Patricia hissed without looking at me. "You're making a scene." "I think the scene was made for me," I replied, and I heard how calm I sounded. I hated that calm. It was the calm I kept for children when they cried after someone laughed at their art. I looked at Dad. "You promised me that seat." "Circumstances change," he said, and the words were so familiar. They'd been his favorite in staff meetings, in phone calls, in apologies that weren't apologies, that I nearly laughed. Jessica's connections are not classroom experience, I said. This is an education fund, not a corporate ladder. Jessica's smile turned arctic. "Managing a multi-million-dollar fund requires more than good intentions, Liora." "It requires knowing what teachers need," I said. "Do you?" Security moved like a thought through the crowd. Patricia lifted her hand without looking at me, and 2 men in black suits drifted closer, soft shoes silent on the honeyed carpet. "Liora," Dad said, and his principal voice arrived like a summons. "Please return to your table." "Your daughter is asking you not to erase her," Marcus said, suddenly at my side. I hadn't heard him approach. He addressed the guards evenly. "It's all right. We're leaving." "Finally," Patricia muttered. Marcus turned to Dad. "A parting question," he said, as if he were late to a meeting and wanted to be respectful of everyone's time. "Do you know your primary sponsor?" "Of course," Dad snapped. "Tech Edu. Some tech CEO who cares about schools." "Some tech CEO," Marcus repeated, and I saw a change in his face, an angle deepening, a door opening that I had only ever seen ajar. He glanced toward David Chen. "Mr. Chen, you might want to check your email." Phones bloomed around the room like nocturnal flowers. David Chen's brow furrowed, then lifted, then sharpened into something that made my pulse synchronize with the camera light blinking near the bar. Patricia frowned. "What is this?" "Nothing you didn't already agree to," Marcus said, pocketing his phone. He looked at me then. not to ask for permission, not to reassure me, but to promise something I didn't yet have words for. In the hush that followed, the quartet stayed still, their bows hovering just above the strings. The room seemed to lean toward us, as if the floors themselves were listening. "Come on," Marcus said softly. "If they don't want you at the family table, we won't fight for a chair." I let him take my hand, but I didn't look away from my father, because as we turned, I saw it, a tremor in his certainty, the smallest shift in a carefully built mask. It was the first time all night he looked like a man who didn't know what was about to happen. Neither did I. But Marcus did. And for the first time since I'd walked into the room that would have rather swallowed me whole than seat me at the front, I felt something loosen inside my ribs. Not victory, not relief. A hinge, maybe. The sense that a door I hadn't known was there was about to swing wide on its own. We took 3 steps. "Wait," David Chen said into the microphone, eyes on his phone, voice low and newly urgent. "Before this proceeds, we need clarity regarding our sponsor." Every head turned, not toward my father, not toward Patricia or Jessica, but toward the quiet man at my side, whose phone would not stop lighting, whose calm never cracked, and whose secrets suddenly felt like an anchor I could hold. I didn't know the truth yet, but I could feel its shape. And it was big enough to rearrange the room. The silence in the ballroom thickened as David Chen's words cut through the golden air. I stopped mid-step, Marcus's hand still around mine. The security guards paused too, uncertain whether to follow Patricia's command or the chairman's new directive. David held up his phone, scanning the screen like the fate of the evening was trapped inside those few inches of glass. His expression shifted from curiosity to alarm. "Robert," he said carefully, "we may need to pause before moving forward." My father bristled, the way he always had when someone questioned him in public. "David, this is a retirement gala, not a board meeting. We can discuss technicalities later." Marcus's voice remained quiet, but in the hush it carried. "With respect, Mr. Chen is right. It's not a technicality, it's the contract." Patricia's laugh rang brittle, glassy. "Contract? Oh, please, you're a schoolteacher's husband, not a corporate lawyer." Marcus didn't rise to the bait. He looked at her with a calm that made her falter. "Funny. I thought contracts mattered most to lawyers." Jessica stiffened, though she kept her perfect smile trained for the crowd. "This isn't the time, nor the place," she said crisply. "We'll handle fund governance in due course." "Fund governance?" Marcus repeated softly, almost amused. "So you did read the terms." Jessica blinked. "Of course I did." David Chen lowered his phone. "Then you'll remember Section 7. Something rippled across the crowd. Curiosity, suspicion, the stir of a secret about to break open. Teachers craned their necks. Donors leaned forward. Even the servers carrying trays of champagne slowed their steps. Patricia frowned. "Section 7 of what?" "The Tech Edu sponsorship contract," David said. He glanced at Marcus again as if seeking confirmation. Marcus inclined his head ever so slightly, a gesture that wasn't permission so much as inevitability. My father's jaw tightened. Jessica reviewed the contract. Everything was in order. Jessica's lipstick smile wavered. It was standard language, nothing unusual. "Standard?" Marcus echoed. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone again, and swiped with deliberate slowness. "Section 7.3, Board Membership Requirements." He read aloud, his voice steady, professional, caring without effort. "Fund management must prioritize representation of active classroom educators. Preference shall be given to candidates with demonstrated teaching experience within the past 5 years." The ballroom gasped collectively, like a single lung sucking in air. My heart pounded so hard it felt visible. Active classroom educators. That was me. That had always been me. Dad's face flushed dark crimson. "That clause is boilerplate. Sponsors add irrelevant fluff all the time. It doesn't override the board's discretion." Marcus's gaze didn't waver. "Except it does. Section 12.1 explicitly states that failure to comply with conditions may result in immediate withdrawal of funds." Jessica's smirk cracked like porcelain under heat. "You can't seriously mean—" But David Chen cut her off. "He's right. It's binding. I'm looking at the signed contract right now. Robert, did you review this with counsel before signing?" The silence that followed was brutal. My father's mouth opened, closed. Patricia's hand flew to Jessica's arm. "You told us it was fine," she hissed. Jessica faltered. "I skimmed it. It looked routine." The word skimmed detonated like a grenade. Donors exchanged sharp whispers. Someone near the press table actually chuckled in disbelief. That clause alone changes everything, David Chen said, his voice cooling. Robert, your announcement tonight directly violates the agreement. We're already exposed. My father tried to recover, projecting the same principal authority that had kept classrooms in line for decades. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no cause for alarm. We'll resolve this internally. But the room no longer belonged to him. It belonged to Marcus. He slipped his phone back into his pocket, his eyes steady on my father. The problem is simple. You promised this position to your daughter 3 years ago because she's a teacher, because she represents exactly what the fund is supposed to support. Tonight, you erased her in favor of someone who's never stepped inside a classroom. That's not just a personal slight. That's a contractual breach. Patricia's voice shrilled. You're twisting words. Who even are you to lecture us on contracts? Marcus finally smiled, not triumphantly, but like a man who had waited for this moment longer than anyone realized. That's the right question, Mrs. Hamilton. He turned toward the microphone, his hand brushing mine before he stepped forward. Excuse me, he said into the mic, his calmness wrapping the room in silence. Before this evening continues, there's something the Hamilton family, and all of you, should know. Every head swiveled toward him. The string quartet froze, bows suspended midair. Marcus looked directly at my father. You said earlier you didn't know much about Tekedu's leadership. Allow me to clarify. A hush fell deeper than before, thick as velvet. He straightened, his voice resonant. My name is Marcus Hamilton, and I am the founder and CEO of Tekedu Corporation. The room erupted. Gasps, exclamations, a champagne glass shattering against marble. The camera flashes came like lightning. My knees nearly gave way, and I gripped the back of a chair just to keep standing. My father's face went gray. Patricia's diamond necklace seemed suddenly gaudy, cheap against her pallor. Jessica whispered, That's impossible, but her voice trembled. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every syllable cut clean. I built Tekedu 5 years ago with one mission, to ensure teachers have the resources they deserve. That mission included a $5 million partnership with this fund, under very clear conditions that were ignored tonight. The chandeliers seemed to pulse brighter, as though the very room was leaning into the reveal. For the first time all evening, I wasn't invisible. I was incandescent, because the quiet man at my side had just detonated the truth in front of 200 witnesses. And everything, my father's legacy, Jessica's ambition, Patricia's careful veneer, was about to collapse under the weight of it. The words still echoed in my head. I am the founder and CEO of Tekedu Corporation. They bounced against the chandeliers, ricocheted off crystal glasses, and crashed down onto the polished marble floor. For a moment, I thought maybe I had misheard, that Marcus had said something else, something smaller, something that wouldn't rearrange the very air in the room. But no, 200 faces confirmed it. They stared, slack-jawed, as though the quiet man they had dismissed all evening had suddenly walked on water. Patricia was the first to find her voice. You're lying, she hissed, her sequins glittering angrily under the light. This is some kind of performance, a stunt. Marcus didn't flinch. No stunt, just truth. He pulled out his phone again, tapped once, and a massive screen behind the stage lit up. The Tekedu logo appeared, bright and undeniable, followed by a photograph. Marcus at a ribbon cutting for an underfunded school, a group of smiling children holding tablets in their hands. Gasps rippled like a wave across the ballroom. 5 years ago, Marcus continued, I stood in a classroom and watched my wife come home with receipts she shouldn't have had to pay. Books, pencils, art supplies, all out of her own pocket. I promised her, and every teacher like her, that one day they would no longer have to choose between their students and their own bills. That's why Tekedu exists. The teachers at table 12, the table of exile, sat straighter. Some clutched each other's hands. Mrs. Chen had tears pooling in the corners of her eyes. Jessica let out a brittle laugh, the sound of porcelain cracking. Even if what you say is true, which I doubt, you can't just barge in here and dictate terms. My appointment is already announced. Marcus's smile was polite, surgical. Actually, Ms. Morrison, your appointment violates the contract your stepfather signed. Section 7.3, as I read earlier, requires active classroom educators on the board. You skimmed over that part, didn't you? Jessica's lips parted, then closed. Her composure trembled, barely holding. David Chen cleared his throat, his voice formal now. Robert, as board chairman, I need to state for the record that tonight's announcement cannot stand. It exposes us to immediate withdrawal of sponsorship. My father's face looked carved from stone, but sweat beaded near his temple. This is absurd, he snapped. We are talking about a fund that helps hundreds of teachers. You would jeopardize all of that over one clause? One clause that defines the soul of the agreement, Marcus said sharply. His voice finally had an edge, the kind of steel that made the crowd lean closer. This fund wasn't created to elevate lawyers or line resumes. It was created to support teachers, real teachers, the ones who give everything and get scraps in return. Patricia slammed her palm on the table, rattling the silverware. You orchestrated this. You planned to humiliate us in front of everyone. Marcus tilted his head, unbothered. I didn't plan your choices, Patricia. You did that yourselves. Every insult, every dismissal, every time you called my wife an embarrassment. The screen shifted again. Images appeared. Classrooms, grant receipts, teachers holding oversized checks from Tech-Edu. Proof. Evidence. Marcus hadn't just walked into the ballroom with claims. He had receipts the size of a movie screen. The crowd murmured, phones snapping photos. A few reporters scribbled notes furiously. Then Marcus's tone softened. Robert, he said, addressing my father directly, you had a chance to honor your daughter tonight, the one who followed in your footsteps, who chose a life of service and education. Instead, you erased her in favor of someone with prestige but no understanding of what it means to stand in front of 30 kids and change their lives. You didn't just insult her, you insulted every teacher in this room. The teachers at table 12 started clapping, tentative at first, then stronger. The sound spread. Table 11 joined, then 10. Soon, half the ballroom was applauding, while my father stood frozen, humiliation written across his face. Patricia's voice sliced through the clapping. You don't have the power to change this. Marcus finally raised his voice, not with anger, but with clarity. I do, because Tech-Edu's $5 million sponsorship is contingent on integrity, and as of this moment, I am withdrawing all funding from the Hamilton Education Fund. The words dropped like thunder. No, my father barked, his voice cracking. You can't. You signed. I signed a contract you breached the moment you appointed Jessica, Marcus cut in smoothly. The clauses are clear. The sponsorship is void. The ballroom erupted again. Gasps, whispers, phones flashing live stream notifications. Reporters bolted for the doors, desperate to be the first to publish the implosion of Robert Hamilton's legacy. Jessica's carefully practiced smile shattered. You've ruined me, she stammered, her voice shaking. Do you know what this will do to my career? Marcus didn't answer her. He turned to me instead. But that doesn't mean the money disappears, he said, his voice warm now, pulling me back from the shock that threatened to collapse me. Because tonight I'm establishing a new fund. The screen behind him shifted one final time. Words appeared in bold, white letters against a midnight blue background. The Liora Hamilton Excellence in Teaching Foundation. My breath caught. This foundation, Marcus continued, will be run by educators, for educators. It will provide scholarships, grants, mental health support, and classroom resources. It will honor the people who are the backbone of our future, and it will be chaired, he looked at me, his gaze steady, unwavering, by the woman who inspired it all. The ballroom shook with applause. Teachers rose to their feet. Some donors clapped too, swept up in the momentum. Patricia collapsed into her chair, pale and shaking. My father stood rigid, a man watching his empire turn to dust before his eyes. I stood frozen, torn between disbelief and the tidal wave of pride swelling in my chest. Because in less than 5 minutes, Marcus had dismantled their world and built mine. The applause thundered in my ears, but it felt far away, like waves crashing against a cliff. I stood too far inland to touch. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My name was lit up on the ballroom screen for the first time all night, not as an afterthought, but as the headline. Patricia surged to her feet, her sequined gown catching every hostile spark of light. This is fraud, she shrieked. Manipulation! He's been lying to you all along, hiding who he is, plotting this spectacle to embarrass us. Her words ricocheted through the room, but the applause only dimmed slightly. Marcus didn't flinch. He looked at her the way one might study a storm through glass, acknowledging its fury, but untouched. I never lied, Marcus said calmly. I lived quietly, supported my wife, and let my work speak for itself. You all assumed quiet meant weak. That was your mistake. Jessica grabbed the microphone from the podium, her voice shaking but sharpened by panic. This doesn't change anything. I have the qualifications, the legal expertise, the drive. A fund like this requires ambition, not babysitting children with crayons. A collective gasp rippled through the teachers' tables. Mrs. Chen stood halfway, her face flushed with anger. We are not babysitters, she said, her voice trembling but firm. We're educators. Without us, none of you would even know how to spell your names. The crowd erupted again, half applause, half shocked murmurs. Phones angled toward Jessica, recording every second. Jessica's smile cracked completely. Experience doesn't matter when you have talent, she snapped. Some people are born leaders. Others are just teachers. The words landed like poison in the air. I felt them burn through me, but before I could speak, Marcus stepped back, offering me the space I didn't realize I needed. I took it. Just teachers? My voice cut clear across the ballroom, steady despite the tremor in my hands. I stepped closer to the microphone, close enough to see my father's face stiffen. Let me tell you what just teachers do. We wipe tears before anyone notices. We spend weekends grading and weekdays buying supplies with our own money. We take 30 children and make them feel like 30 miracles. That's not just, that's everything. For a moment, the room held its breath. Even the string quartet set their bows down. Jessica opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Dad finally spoke, his voice cracking through the silence like a whip. Enough. You're humiliating yourself, Liora. Sit down before you make this worse. His words sliced sharper than any blade. Not her, not you, but Liora. My name, his daughter, spoken like a reprimand, not recognition. I swallowed hard. You erased me tonight, Dad. You erased your own daughter from your table, from your speech, from your legacy, but you can't erase me from myself. Gasps, whispers. My father's face darkened, the authority that once commanded entire schools faltering against the weight of 200 eyes watching him unravel. Security! Patricia shouted again, desperation sharpening her voice. Get them out of here! The guards hesitated, glancing at Marcus, then at David Chen, then at the donors, whispering furiously. The power dynamic had shifted. Nobody knew whose orders still mattered. Marcus raised a hand, calm, almost gentle. No need. We're leaving. He turned to me, his eyes steady, his voice soft enough for only me to hear. But they need to see one more thing first. He pulled out his phone once more and tapped the screen. The ballroom projector flickered. Then the image changed again. Not contracts, not logos, but photos of my classroom. The walls covered in student drawings, a corkboard lined with handmade thank you notes, a bookshelf crammed with donated paperbacks, and at the center, me, caught in a candid photo, kneeling beside a child, holding a book open as she pointed at a word, her smile wide with discovery. The audience stilled. This, Marcus said, his voice resonant with pride, is what real success looks like. This is what actually matters. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. He turned back to my father. Robert, you taught students to chase prestige, but your daughter teaches them to believe in themselves. That's the difference between building a resume and shaping a life, and that's why she, not Jessica, will carry education forward. The applause this time wasn't polite, it wasn't hesitant, it was thunderous, rising from the back tables forward, teachers and parents and even a few donors standing to their feet. I felt the weight of humiliation begin to lift, replaced by something stronger, fiercer, like I was finally standing in the place I was meant to. And for the first time in 35 years, I didn't care if my father approved. The ballroom was no longer just a stage for Dad's farewell. It had become a courtroom, and every eye in the room was the jury. The applause rolled like thunder against the marble walls, a verdict echoing before the trial had even ended. Patricia slammed her hand against the table again, rattling cutlery and crystal. This is outrageous! You think you can just hijack Robert's night? That you can rewrite 30 years of legacy with a slideshow and a sob story? Her words sliced through the noise, but even as she spat them, people were already shaking their heads. Some filmed her meltdown, others whispered furiously, and I caught the unmistakable glow of a live-stream comment feed flickering on screens across the room. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. I'm not rewriting Robert's legacy. I'm revealing it. He gestured toward me, then toward the teachers at the back tables. His legacy isn't built on family pride. It's built on the people he ignored, the teachers he dismissed, the daughter he erased. Jessica surged forward, yanking the microphone out of its stand. Her voice shook, but she tried to sound authoritative. This is defamation. I earned my place. I have the credentials, the connections. This foundation needs someone like me at the helm. David Chen stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. His face was grim. Ms. Morrison, you may be a competent lawyer, but you are not what this fund requires. You've compromised the board tonight, and you've compromised us. Jessica's composure cracked. Compromised? I was doing what's best for the fund. No, David said coldly. You were doing what's best for yourself. The audience murmured in agreement. Patricia clutched Jessica's wrist, dragging her close. Her whisper wasn't quiet enough. Stop talking. You're making it worse. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. But watching Jessica's mask crumble, I felt only a hollow ache. She wasn't my blood, but she had become the weapon used against me. And now she was splintering under the weight of her own arrogance. Dad finally rose, his voice a strained echo of the authority he once carried. Enough! This is family business, not a public spectacle. Everyone sit down, and let's remember why we're here tonight. But the room wasn't his anymore. The donors weren't his. Even the security guards hovered uncertainly, waiting for a cue from someone who actually held power. Marcus met my father's glare, then addressed the room. You're right, Robert. It is family business. Because tonight, you taught the world how you treat your own family, how you treat teachers, and the world is watching. He pointed subtly toward the phones lifted high in the crowd. Screens glowed, comments scrolled, hashtags were already trending. My humiliation had gone viral, and so had their contempt. Dad's face blanched. I stepped forward, my voice soft but steady. You could have shared this night with me, Dad. You could have made me proud to stand at your side. But instead, you made me invisible. For the first time all evening, his eyes met mine, and in them I saw something terrifying. Not guilt, not shame, but fear. Because he finally understood what he was about to lose. Marcus turned back to the microphone, his tone final. Effective immediately. Tech Edu is withdrawing its sponsorship from the Hamilton Education Fund. Gasps cracked across the room like lightning. And redirecting all $5 million, Marcus continued, to the newly established Liora Hamilton Excellence in Teaching Foundation. The applause that followed wasn't just noise, it was a tidal wave. Teachers stood, parents stood, even a few board members clapped, the weight of loyalty shifting in real time. Patricia sank into her chair, her hand trembling against her diamond necklace. Jessica's face was ashen, her phone buzzing relentlessly with calls she didn't dare answer. My father remained standing, but he looked smaller somehow, a man shrinking inside his own suit. And me? For the first time in my life, I wasn't begging to be seen. I was undeniable. The applause thundered so loud it drowned out the string quartet, the clinking glasses, even the frantic buzz of phones lighting up with live stream notifications. My name was on every tongue now, carried not as a whisper, but as a shout. Dad stood stiff at the VIP table, his jaw locked, his face blotched crimson and pale at once. For 30 years, he had been the man with the microphone, the voice of authority. Tonight, that authority had been stripped away. Patricia clutched her champagne flute with trembling fingers. This is theft, she spat, her voice shrill enough to pierce the din. You can't just take our fund, our money, and hand it to her. She jabbed a manicured finger in my direction. She doesn't deserve it. A murmur of disapproval rolled through the crowd, sharper this time. Someone near the back muttered, She's the only one who does deserve it. Marcus's voice cut through, calm but unyielding. It isn't theft, it's correction. Money pledged under contract doesn't belong to Robert Hamilton or Patricia Morrison or Jessica. It belongs to the mission. And the mission is teachers. The words hit like a gavel. Jessica scrambled to recover, her lawyer instincts kicking in despite the panic etched across her face. Contracts can be renegotiated, she argued. We'll contest this in court. You think you can humiliate us and walk away untouched? You've underestimated me. Marcus turned toward her, and for the first time, his calmness sharpened into steel. No, Jessica. You underestimated the teachers you've dismissed. You underestimated the claws you skimmed. You underestimated the people watching this live stream right now, forming opinions that will follow you into every courtroom, every boardroom, every client meeting. Jessica froze. A phone screen glowed in her hand. notifications stacking one after another. I caught a glimpse. Trending Nasha, just a teacher. Her face drained of color. David Chen stepped forward, adjusting his glasses with deliberate care. "Robert," he said, his tone like ice cracking, "the board will convene an emergency session immediately. But as of this moment, Jessica's appointment is void. And frankly, so is your credibility." Dad sputtered, "David, you can't—" "I can," Chen said firmly, "because Tekedu's withdrawal leaves this fund with nothing but broken promises. And unlike you, I won't sit by and watch our reputation burn to ash." The words silenced my father in a way I had never seen, not as a principal, not as a father, not as a man. For the first time, Robert Hamilton looked powerless. Patricia shot up from her chair, her sequins flashing harshly under the lights. "You will regret this," she hissed at Marcus. "You and your little schoolteacher wife. You think this is victory? It's destruction. And when the dust settles, you'll be standing in the ruins." Marcus only smiled faintly. "Funny. From where I'm standing, the ruins aren't ours." He reached for my hand then, not for show, not for performance, but with the quiet certainty of a man who had built an empire from silence. His palm was warm, grounding me against the tidal wave of stairs. "Liora," he said softly, but the microphone caught his words anyway, sending them across the ballroom. "This foundation is yours, not because of me, because of everything you've already done, unseen. Tonight they all get to see what I've known all along." The applause surged again, this time rising from the back and rolling forward like a tide reclaiming shore. Teachers clapped until their palms were red. Parents cheered. Even some donors, cautious but swayed, stood to their feet. I felt my throat tighten, my chest fill with something I hadn't dared to hope for in years: recognition. Not from my father, not from Patricia, not even from Jessica. Recognition from the people who mattered. I looked at Dad one last time. He was still standing, but his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. He had always told me teaching was safe but small, that I had chosen less. Tonight, the world had proven him wrong. And for the first time in 35 years, I no longer needed him to say my name. The ballroom felt transformed. The same chandeliers that had once cast their light like judgment now seemed to shine with approval, reflecting off raised glasses and tear-bright eyes. But at the VIP table, where the spotlight had burned the hottest, the air was suffocating. Jessica's phone buzzed again. She answered without thinking, her voice barely above a whisper, but the microphone still in her hand betrayed her. "Yes, Mr. Richardson. I understand. No, She froze, color draining from her face. "Yes, sir. Tomorrow morning." When she lowered the phone, the silence pressed in. She looked at Patricia, eyes wide with panic. "The firm, they saw the live stream. They're reconsidering my partnership track." A low ripple of murmurs swept the room. Donors shifted uncomfortably. Teachers exchanged glances. Reporters scribbled furiously. Patricia grabbed her daughter's wrist. "Don't say another word. We'll spin this. We'll tell them you were misquoted, that—" "It was live, Mother," Jessica snapped, her voice cracking under the weight of reality. 50,000 people watched me say teachers are worthless. How do you spin that? The crowd gasped again, phones catching every word. A few teachers shook their heads in disbelief. Mrs. Chen whispered sharply to a colleague, "Worthless? She actually said that?" I stood rooted, torn between satisfaction and pity. Jessica had been cruel, yes, but she was also unraveling in real time, her ambition collapsing under the weight of her own arrogance. Dad finally spoke, his voice gravelly, desperate. "Enough. Everyone stop. This isn't about contracts or live streams. This is about my legacy." He turned toward Marcus, his eyes blazing. "You think you can just waltz in here and destroy 30 years of work? You think you can humiliate me in front of my colleagues, my friends?" Marcus didn't raise his voice, but his words carried. "Robert, you destroyed yourself. Not tonight. Long before. Every time you dismissed teachers, every time you chose prestige over purpose, tonight is simply the harvest of those choices." The hush that followed was heavier than applause. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to speak. "You could have stood with me, Dad. You could have shown me that teaching mattered to you as much as it matters to me. Instead, you stood with them, and you lost everything." His eyes flicked to mine then, sharp with hurt, but behind it I saw something else. Fear. Not of me, not of Marcus, of the truth. Patricia clutched his arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. We're not finished. We'll sue. We'll fight. We'll ruin both of you if we have to." Marcus exhaled slowly, almost like a sigh. "Please do. I look forward to watching you explain in court why calling teachers worthless isn't a violation of professional ethics, or why skimming a $5 million contract isn't negligence, or why humiliating your daughter in public wasn't defamation of your own family's name." Patricia froze, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. The teachers at table 12 rose to their feet again, clapping harder this time, joined by parents and even a few board members. The sound was deafening, a tidal wave that rolled over the ballroom and drowned out every protest. Jessica crumpled back into her chair, her phone buzzing relentlessly. Patricia's sequins no longer sparkled. They looked garish, desperate. My father stared down at the tablecloth, his hands shaking, his empire of reputation reduced to rubble in less than an hour. And me? For the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel erased. I felt undeniable. The ballroom was a battlefield disguised in crystal and gold. The applause, the gasps, the rustle of whispers, it all folded together into a single relentless sound that beat against my father like waves breaking down a cliff. He remained standing, but I could see the tremor in his hand where it gripped the back of his chair. Patricia leaned into him, her voice sharp, desperate. "Robert, say something. Take control back before it's too late." But control had already slipped through his fingers. Jessica sat rigid, her eyes glued to her phone as messages poured in faster than she could swipe them away. Her lips moved silently. "Please, no. This isn't fair. This isn't happening." The confident lawyer who once strutted into rooms had been replaced by someone small, someone cornered. David Chen cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the chaos with the weight of authority. "Mr. Hamilton, in light of what we've all witnessed tonight, the board will require your immediate resignation." The words landed like a gavel. "No," Dad said hoarsely, shaking his head. "You can't just erase me. 30 years. 30 years doesn't give you immunity from accountability," David interrupted. "You signed a contract. You violated it. And tonight, the entire community saw exactly how little you value the people you claim to serve." The teachers at the back clapped again, louder this time, a chorus that drowned out my father's protest. Patricia shot to her feet, her face red beneath the glitter of her gown. "You're all ungrateful. Robert built this district's reputation. Without him, none of you would even be here." A voice rang out from the back, one of the teachers, firm and unafraid. "Without us, none of you would be here. He forgot that, but we didn't." The room erupted in agreement. I felt Marcus's hand slide into mine, steady, grounding. He wasn't smiling. This wasn't triumph for him. It was truth. And truth always came with a cost. Dad's eyes finally lifted to mine. For the first time all night, the mask slipped. His voice cracked, fragile. "Liora, please. You know I didn't mean to." But I didn't let him finish. My throat burned, but my voice was steady. "You meant every choice, Dad. Every dismissal, every insult, every time you chose them over me. Tonight isn't the first time you erased me. It's just the first time the world saw you do it." His mouth opened, then closed again. No words came. Marcus stepped back to the microphone one last time. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his tone firm but final, "the Hamilton Education Fund is no more. Tonight marks the beginning of the Liora Hamilton Excellence in Teaching Foundation. $5 million, managed by educators, for the people who actually shape the future." The cheers that followed were unlike anything I'd ever heard, loud, defiant, triumphant. They filled the ballroom, ricocheted off the walls, pressed into every heart. And in the middle of it all, I stood taller than I ever had, not because my father finally saw me, but because I finally saw myself. The ballroom had turned into a storm. Applause rose and fell in crashing waves, while at the center table, the Hamilton name was unraveling thread by thread. I could feel the shift in the air, the donors leaning away from my father, the teachers leaning toward me, the parents in the crowd clapping with a kind of righteous fury. Jessica's phone buzzed again. This time she answered, hands shaking. "Yes, Mr. Richardson, I understand. No, I didn't know it would." Her voice cracked, and she pressed the phone tighter to her ear. "Yes, sir. First thing tomorrow." She hung up, staring at the floor like it had betrayed her. Patricia tried to snatch the phone from her. "Who was that?" Jessica whispered, "The managing partner. They're calling an ethics review." The words hung in the air like smoke. Patricia gasped, a sound so sharp it almost hurt. No, no, they wouldn't dare. You're Harvard Law. I'm the lawyer who called teachers worthless on a live stream, Jessica snapped, tears breaking through her carefully painted mask. And now it's everywhere. The firm, the clients, the state bar, they all saw it. The crowd murmured, a low rumble of judgment. Teachers shook their heads. Parents folded their arms, their expressions hard. Reporters scribbled faster, cameras flashing like lightning across a dark sky. Dad's face was ashen, the authority that had carried him for decades stripped bare. He gripped the edge of the table as if it might keep him upright. This isn't how it ends, he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. It can't end like this. Marcus's voice was steady, unrelenting. It ends the way choices always end, Robert, with consequences. David Chen stepped forward, holding a phone in his hand. The live stream has already passed 100,000 views. By morning, it'll be national news. Robert, the board cannot salvage this. We'll need your resignation in writing. Patricia's chair screeched as she stood. You vultures, all of you. Robert gave you his life, his brilliance, his leadership. And this is how you repay him? A teacher's voice cut through from the back. Respect isn't repaid, it's earned. And he stopped earning it a long time ago. Applause followed, sharper this time, like the crack of a gavel. I looked at my father. His eyes, once so full of certainty, were hollow. And for the first time, I realized he wasn't just losing his reputation. He was losing the power he had always used to keep me small. I swallowed hard, my voice rising above the clamor. You erased me tonight, Dad, but you didn't erase what I've done, or who I am. You just showed the world who you've become. His lips parted, but no words came. Marcus took the microphone again. This isn't about revenge. This is about respect. The Hamilton Fund dies tonight. The Liora Hamilton Foundation is born in its place. And from this moment forward, teachers will no longer sit at the back table. The eruption of applause was deafening. Teachers stood, parents cheered, even board members clapped. The room no longer belonged to my father. It belonged to every person he had overlooked. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for a seat. I was at the head of the table. The ballroom shook with applause, but I heard it as if underwater. All I could focus on was my father, his face drained of color, his body rigid as though the very suit he wore was the only thing holding him together. 30 years of power and prestige were slipping through his fingers, and there was nothing left for him to clutch. Patricia pressed close to him, her sequined sleeve glittering like shattered glass. Robert, say something, she whispered fiercely. Fight back. But for once in his life, my father had no words. Jessica sat collapsed in her chair, staring blankly at her phone as notifications poured in, each one tightening the noose. Her carefully curated image of success was crumbling in front of everyone. The Harvard Law graduate reduced to a headline. The lawyer who called teachers worthless. David Chen stood tall, his voice calm but final. Robert, this board cannot move forward with you at the helm. We'll expect your resignation on my desk by Monday. No, Dad rasped, shaking his head like a stubborn child. I built this. You can't take it from me. Marcus's tone was like tempered steel. You didn't lose it tonight, Robert. You lost it the moment you decided prestige mattered more than people. Tonight, the world simply found out. A hush swept across the crowd, heavier than any applause. Every camera was turned toward us now, every phone capturing a family legacy, disintegrating in real time. I stepped forward, my legs trembling but my voice steady. Dad, all I ever wanted was for you to see me, to value what I do. But instead you chose to erase me. Tonight you erased yourself. His eyes met mine, eyes I'd searched my whole life for recognition in. All I saw now was defeat. Patricia tried to rally, her voice rising shrill above the silence. This isn't over. We'll sue. We'll destroy you both. But her threats were drowned out by the sound of teachers rising to their feet again, clapping, cheering, chanting my name. Liora! Liora! The walls of the crystal ballroom shook with it. The very air seemed to shift, pulling me into a place I had never stood before. Not in the shadows. Not at table 12. But at the center. At last. The chant of my name echoed off marble and glass, louder than the string quartet had ever been, louder than my father's speeches had ever carried. For the first time in my life, I wasn't background noise in his story. I was the story. Jessica's phone buzzed relentlessly. She finally answered on speaker by accident, her trembling fingers fumbling the screen. A man's voice filled the ballroom, stern, Clipped. Ms. Morrison, the partners have reviewed the footage. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending ethics review. The room gasped as Jessica's face crumpled. She hung up quickly, but the damage was already done. Whispers rippled like wildfire. Suspended. Ethics review. Finished. Patricia lunged for the microphone, but Marcus intercepted it with the calm ease of someone who had already anticipated every move. Enough, he said, his tone carrying across the ballroom like a verdict. This charade ends tonight. He turned to the crowd, his hand still wrapped firmly around mine. Teachers are the spine of this nation, yet they are dismissed, underpaid, unappreciated, even by the people who should know better. Tonight, that changes. The teachers erupted again, stomping their feet now, clapping in rhythm. The sound shook the floor beneath us. David Chen raised his hand for silence, his expression resolute. As board chairman, I move that the Hamilton Education Fund be dissolved, effective immediately. Its assets and mission will transfer to the Liora Hamilton Excellence in Teaching Foundation. Seconded, called another board member from across the room. Thirded, came another. The decision was unanimous before my father could even open his mouth. He did try, though. His voice was a hollow echo of the man he once was. You can't do this. You're destroying me. You're destroying my life's work. No, Robert, David said coldly. You destroyed yourself, and you did it by forgetting who this work was supposed to be for. My father sank into his chair, his shoulders caving. The mighty principal, the man who once commanded entire schools with his voice, looked like nothing more than a tired old man clutching a glass of water he couldn't steady. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated, but all I felt was release. Like chains had quietly fallen away, leaving only the echo of their weight behind. Marcus raised my hand high, his eyes warm and unwavering. Tonight belongs to Liora, he said, and to every teacher who has ever been told they are just a teacher. From this night on, that phrase will no longer mean small. It will mean extraordinary. The cheer that followed shook me to my bones. And for the first time in 35 years, I no longer needed my father's approval. I had found something greater, my own.